Welcome to another episode of the albumreview.net podcast. I'm Greg Potters. I am very pleased to welcome a special guest on the podcast today. This person's a member of a rock band that I've been gripped by for the past 6 months. I'm relatively new to their music, but in the last 6 months, I've certainly gotten up to speed with their wide music catalog. In this episode, I'm joined by writer, journalist, and bass player for the Chicago quartet Ratboys. His name is Sean Neumann. Ratboys are a fantastic rock band that have toured the world. Sean and the band recently finished a tour supporting their 2023 album release, The Window. Ratboys are a fantastic band that has toured the world. Sean and the band recently finished a tour supporting their 2023 album release, The Window. In this episode, Sean and I talk about what it's like to be a touring musician with the popular band Ratboys. We also talk about Sean's journalism career. When he's not touring, Sean is also a writer and a journalist for People magazine. Before joining People, Sean also worked as a freelance reporter for a number of publications, including Rolling Stone, Vice, ESPN, the New York Times, and a bunch more. So, no need to sit back during this episode, folks. Sit straight up because you're going to want to pay attention and listen to this conversation. So, without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Ratboys bassist Sean Neumann. But we had a chance to meet at the Sinclair in Cambridge last month.
Yeah, it was great.
You guys were touring with Palehound, if I have that right.
Hell yeah, yeah.
And it was an excellent show, I must add.
Thanks. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you guys have been on tour throughout 2023 and 2024, supporting your most recent album, The Window.
Yeah.
And you guys closed things out in your hometown of Chicago recently,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, just last week. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Is
last
it is
Friday.
it Talia Hall? Did I pronounce that
Uh
right?
yeah, I say that too. Some people pronounce it with like the TH, like Thalia Hall, but
Okay, okay.
I don't think anyone actually knows.
How did
But
the
I say
rest of the
Talia
tour,
Hall. Yeah.
Talia Hall? How did the rest of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
tour go?
I went awesome. Yeah. I mean, all those shows were just I use the word like shockingly, but not in a way that sounds bad, but like just in the way that it's like still unbelievable that we're able to play music in front of anyone at all, but to like
Yeah,
play in front of hundreds of people, if sometimes thousands of people, depending on the tour. It's just
right.
like
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah, it's a wake up call to like come home from that and just you know what I
It
mean? Like
must
back
be,
to real life,
right?
like hello, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, it must be
it's
returning to
crazy.
the kind of monotony maybe of the regular day
Yeah.
to day, right? So
Yeah,
are
yeah,
are you, Sean, are you originally from Chicago?
yeah. So Dave, who plays guitar in Rap
Yeah.
Boys, and I grew up in the south side of Chicago, like 20 minutes south of the city, in like an area. We grew up in like Oak Forest, in that area.
Okay.
Um, and then Marcus, the drummer, grew up on the north side of the city, in a suburb up there. And then Julia grew up in Kentucky, down
Oh,
in Louisville, and then met Dave in college, and then she kind of moved to Chicago, and yeah, we all banded together from there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I wanted to dive into that a little bit, but so you
Mhm.
guys have pretty much finished the tour for the window and you're hitting the studio soon. I think I saw posted somewhere in February for your next
But sorry
album.
if I'm talking over you. But yeah, we just wrapped up the window tour, and we've been on that for God, it seems like forever, but since like August 2023, I guess.
Yeah, so like a year and a
Yeah,
half.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and
And
before that too, just like touring nonstop, other than the pandemic. That's the only thing that really stopped us. We kind of had just always been this band that's always on tour forever.
so it keeps you busy and you've been to all points of the country pretty much, right? All four
Yeah.
corners for the most part.
Yeah, yeah, we've been all over the US like multiple times, which is incredible on its own. You know, like growing up in a like DIY punk background and stuff, it's like crazy that we got to tour the country once, and then we tour the country
Right.
multiple times, then we tour Europe, then we tour Japan, and we do all this shit, and it's yeah, it's amazing, like an extremely lucky situation for all of us.
I can only imagine, man. And so you guys have you, I don't know how much you can divulge. Are you guys writing for the new album now, or do you typically like get together in the studio and then start writing then?
Yeah, we work on it like ahead of time. So yeah, we're on our way writing the record and then recording early next year. But yeah, not too much like figured out until it's like I don't want to sound like an idiot, but like it's till it's like set to tape, it's like I don't it's like it
Sure.
could be anything. So yeah, I don't know. We definitely have like songs. I mean, you saw us play new songs and
I
stuff
did.
like that at the show.
The world so
Yeah,
madly at
hell
the
yeah.
Boston show. Excellent song.
Nice.
Really.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm
Really.
really stoked about that one. That's like one of
Yeah.
my favorites on the potentially new record. And so, yeah, yeah.
Sure. So Sean, you joined the band. If I looked it up, if I looked it up correctly, you joined the band in 2016.
Yeah, like
Is that
late
right?
2016, Julia and Dave were like going on a tour and needed a bassist, and we actually did our very first tour together, like back in 2014. Sorry, my dog is like trying to headbutt the door
You're fine.
behind me. I don't know if you can see that. She's like desperately wants to get in, but I blocked the door. But we
No
yeah, so
worries.
we like back I had this band Single Player, and
Okay.
it was back when it was just Julia and Dave, and their band was just called Rat Boy, like
Right.
singular at the time.
Right. Right. You guys
Um,
there was an issue like a copyright issue or something like that with the name.
yeah, yeah. There's like somehow this is like dumbfounding to me that there's multiple things named Rat Boy or Rat Boys or whatever. But somehow there was some other person named Rat Boy that was like this like children's artist up in the Northeast. Like I think it was somewhere around like Woodstock, New York. The guy like kind of I don't know the whole story, I guess, but I
Right.
think he was just a little stingy about like somehow having like a copyright of it beforehand, even though I don't know. Yeah, it's like we were like an established band at that point, but
Right.
yeah, so I think it was just one of those weird things where it's like, okay, technically, I guess you got to change the name. So Julia just slapped on a S at the
Just
end of it,
pop
and
the
since it,
S on at the
yeah,
end.
it like kind
Yeah.
of it's kind of like a fun story too, because it's like, oh, that's like kind of the point when it was transitioning more to like, me and Marcus were starting to get involved and stuff like that. So it's like funny to be like, oh yeah, that's when it like became pluralized or whatever. So it's
Right.
fitting. So yeah.
Right. Now, I read a very interesting article a little while back. I think it was actually a blog by a guy named Andrew Hughes or Andrew David Hughes.
Okay.
And I believe he did an interview with you where you talked about how your band, like some of the collaborations that you had for the window were some of the best compared to maybe some of your other albums. I don't know
Yeah,
if
yeah.
that's accurate. Now, Black Earth, Wisconsin was my gateway song into you
Oh yeah.
guys.
Wild, yeah. Nice.
Maybe that's why you guys encore or close with it a lot at some of your shows.
Yeah, it's
Um,
fun. It's fun to do like it's like if like anyone that has stayed at the show to this point, like you get rewarded with like a 9-minute song. Like if
love
you
it.
really want to hear this, like
That's
we
my
saved this for
style.
you,
That's my
instead of like
style.
forcing anyone at the beginning of the show to like sit through 9 minutes of something they didn't sign up for or whatever. So
They're
it's
all
it's
there
a
to
fun
hear your
process.
stuff, right? They're all there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's a platform for you guys to try new stuff and
Hmm.
experiment and explore, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
first heard that song. Like I said, that was my gateway. I first heard it in a friend's car driving to a concert, and I
Mhm.
was intrigued. And is it true during that writing that you kind of overheard Julia? But for the listeners, by the way, Julia Steiner is the band's rhythm guitarist and lead singer.
Yeah, thank you.
Dave Sagan is the band's lead guitarist. And Sean, you are the band's bassist. And may I
Yeah,
say as well, you've got some exceptional backing vocals as well.
thanks.
You definitely hold down the back end with not only your bass, but the the rhythm section, but also with your backing vocals. So
Oh, thanks.
when you guys, yeah, when you guys were writing that song, is it true that you sort of heard Julia messing around with that hum, the, la da 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 da
Yeah,
da.
yeah, we lived together at the time actually. Me, Julia, and Dave, and a couple other friends all lived in this big house and that we were renting. And you know, like you could if I lived on the top floor of the house and like would hear in the basement where we'd practice and stuff, you'd hear like, faint guitar and stuff like that every once in a while. And I definitely remember before that practice hearing like Julia sitting down there and like humming that like yeah, she kind of like hummed the riff and then Dave started playing it on guitar and it was like a separate piece of this other song, and then there was like this other
Right.
song that we were trying to connect and stuff, and they were in the same key. And sometimes that works out where it's just like, oh, these two ideas, like maybe subconsciously, whoever was writing the song was kind of like, they were linked at the whole time, but you just didn't realize it until you tried to mash these things together. And so yeah, we ended up like putting them together at that practice later that night. And it yeah, then it like the song kind of just kept expanding like lengthwise in time. So that's how it became this like 9 minute situation. Yeah.
And now your last album was produced by Chris Walla, if I'm pronouncing his last name
Yeah, yeah.
right. So Death Cab for Cutie.
Mhm.
And you guys got a chance to go out to Seattle to
Yeah,
record
yeah.
his studio, the Hall of Justice.
Hmm.
And I read something too that I thought was really cool that you guys, that was the first album that you guys would record completely on analog. Is that is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I grew up recording on like cassette tapes and like 8 tracks and stuff like
Yeah, me
that. But
too.
this
Me
was
too.
this was
Yeah.
like yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, this is like a even, way more in like uh evolved situation of that of just like recording to 2 inch tape. So we recorded to tape out there and I've always I bring up the recording on tape like growing up thing because it's always like fun to, literally with analog stuff, you can physically mess around with it
Right.
or like, you know, you can like bounce on the table or so, like slam the
Right.
table and it'll like jolt the tape or something. Like, or like you could literally just
Right.
stop it with your finger or something. And that's kind of what we did to like make a lot of manipulation noises and stuff like that throughout the record. Like, and Chris is like a genius when it comes to recording on tape because he always has done that, like back to the Death Cab days and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, it was fun to just like all mash our brains together and especially just like watch Chris work, production wise with like figuring all that out. But another huge benefit of recording to tape is that it's, you only get a few shots at it and then you have to re-record over something because you run out of
Sure.
room on the reel or run out of room on the
Right.
tape
That
where you're
can pose a
recording to.
challenge.
Yeah, so like for Black Earth, for example, like we recorded that on the second take that we played it in the studio. And it was like with the song being like 8.5 minutes or 9 minutes long, it was like after recording it twice, it was kind of like, well, was that the one? Because like if not, we had to re-record over the first one, and then we had to start making decisions now. And we were all kind of like, yeah, that was the one. Like we're good on that. Um, but yeah, all the previous records and stuff we primarily recorded. All the previous Ratboys records we like recorded to, like a DAW in the computer, like Pro Tools or something like
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right.
So this was definitely a new experience for us as a group involved. Yeah.
I don't know what your opinion is, Sean, but like I personally feel like analog, even though it's more difficult in some ways or more maybe time consuming is maybe the better
Mm,
word. I've always felt that the sound quality, it's just a lot stronger. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. There's definitely like a warmth to it and like a
Warmth is a good
real,
word.
a
Yeah.
real like ness, whether it's like a little bit of a warble or like I don't know if there's like a piece of dust on the tape or something, you get like a like actual, I mean, I don't, for lack of better words, like analog, listen back to it.
Right.
I don't, I can't like debate the difference. I'm not like intelligent enough about sound to like debate the
Neither am
differences
I.
digital and analog, but like I've always just loved it more. And
Yeah.
I've tried so many times to get into different DAWs and like understand recording on computers and stuff like that. And I'm just so stupid when it comes to that. So I've just like kind of always been in this situation where it's like stick to what you know kind of thing. And
Sure.
I mean, I still would love to like master recording on, Pro Tools or something like that. And, you know the basics, but
It's
like,
confusing.
yeah, yeah,
There's a lot involved.
there's a lot of options. And it's like sometimes, at least in my opinion, or with the type of music that I am typically involved with or make, it's like there doesn't need to be that many options for a lot of
Right.
stuff. So
Yeah, you don't want to
yeah, that's just me
overcomplicate it too
though.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. So are you going to be working with Chris Walla again for this new album, or have you guys made that decision yet?
yeah. The plan is for him to come out and
Awesome.
record with us again. But yeah, we've got to like settle on like like it's very complicated because he lives like overseas now.
Ah, okay.
So it's a lot of like figuring out logistics and stuff like that. So we're on that path right now. But yeah,
Nice.
hopefully it all works out and we can run it back in the studio with Chris.
Yeah, Sean, I also learned that in addition to being a bass player for a touring band, you're also an accomplished writer and journalist.
That's a
So
loose
you,
word.
well, so you currently, correct me if I'm wrong, you currently write for
Yeah,
People Magazine,
yeah, yeah,
and previously you've written articles for Rolling Stone, Vice, ESPN.
yeah,
You had
yeah,
an article published in the Times, the New York Times, and
yeah,
then the
yeah.
Associated Press as well.
Yeah, yeah. One of my first reporting jobs was like working as what they call a stringer for the Associated Press. So
Yeah,
like the local college sports reporter in the town I lived in college, Champaign-Urbana, they
yeah.
kind of just like have like this assistant that runs around and sometimes I would like be like writing a game story or going in for work for him if he like couldn't make it or something like that and would handle things. But most of the time was just like helping, like assist him with reporting and stuff like that. But then yeah, after that I didn't I had a job lined up after college to like go into a like some website that was some sort of writing thing. It wasn't necessarily journalism. My life would have been different if it worked out, but like they kind of ghosted me and I'm like very grateful for that now. And
Right. Yeah.
after that I needed to pay rent, so I was like shit, I guess I'll figure out how to freelance. And yeah, yeah, a bunch of different people kind of saved my ass at that point in my life, like Dan Ozzie, who used to be the music editor over at Vice, with their site is called Noisy.
Hmm.
He took a lot of pitches from me, and a lot of other people at Vice were taking pitches from me because I was kind of the place to freelance at the time. And then I got a gig at Rolling Stone for a while, kind of covering professional wrestling of all things, and like
Very cool.
yeah, it was very sick. And that was like, it's all been freelance based, but like I was there for a while and then, they kind of revamped all their like sections and everyone kind of got let go and then I got bounced somewhere else and then I landed at People in like 2019.
Okay.
Uh, and I've been there pretty much ever since. I left for a little while when we went back to touring, like after the pandemic, and then got back in touch with them like a couple years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I think at this point, and they needed some help and reached out, and I've been back, and they're cool with me touring and stuff, so I'm very grateful for
That was
that.
just going to be my next question. Yeah, like they seem pretty flexible with your tour
Yeah,
schedule, obviously. That's awesome. I not long ago you published an article on a Massachusetts high school football player who
oh,
was hospitalized for a brain injury during the Thanksgiving Day high school
yeah,
football game.
yeah, yeah, a very sad story. Yeah, yeah,
Really sad story. I
yeah.
I live not very far from Sharon, Massachusetts,
Oh,
where the
okay, yeah.
town was,
Mhm.
and yeah, it kind of hit home too. I've got a 12-year-old son who plays football, but I was like, wow,
Yeah,
this is wild. Like I'm reading Sean's article about a football player who lives like not far from me.
yeah,
Just
that's a
a lot
small
of it,
world.
yeah, a lot of it kind of hit home. So you obviously, you mentioned you're from the Champaign-Urbana area. You graduated with a news editorial, a
Yeah.
degree in news editorial journalism, right?
Yeah,
From
which to clarify is writing for newspapers, and I graduated
okay.
in 2016, so that was a good idea. All my professors were like, "Are you guys sure? Like, this is what you want to do? Like newspapers?" But yeah, that's where I came from.
And so, like switching a little bit over to the bass now, like, and I
Uh-huh.
think you told me this when we met in Massachusetts a couple weeks back, but bass your first instrument?
No, actually never like basically touched a bass until that moment when I referenced earlier when in
Right,
like late 2016, Dave and Julia were like, "Hey, do you want to come on tour?" Or they were like it was maybe through my friend Danny who played drums in Ratboys beforehand, and another
right.
person that grew up in Oak Forest with Dave and I. He was like, "Hey, I think Julia and Dave are like looking for someone to tour with like going forward." And I was working at this radio station in Champaign-Urbana at the time, kind of in that weird freelance phase that I talked about,
Sure.
where I was just trying to like make rent, and I knew the job wasn't going anywhere, and I was like, I'll like figure out how to play bass. And Dave is an amazing bass player. Everyone knows him as this like fantastic guitar player, which he is, but like seeing him on the bass is just absolutely incredible. So he
Interesting.
kind of just we sat down like so many times. That's a very deep like emotional memory I have of the beginnings of my run with Ratboys is like me, Dave, and Julia sitting down and just learning every song they've ever written that I was very familiar with because, like we were close friends and close friends as musicians as well, like touring musicians. So,
Right.
yeah, him just teaching me all the songs and I kind of learned how to play bass through playing bass to Ratboys songs. But yeah, I
Amazing.
just primarily played guitar and a little bit of drums beforehand.
And you, I think you shared with me too when we met that night, your decision to play with a pick as opposed to with your fingers was for deeper sound.
Yeah, it kind of stems from me playing guitar first, to be honest,
Right.
and
That makes
just not
sense.
having like, I didn't like grow up in, taking bass lessons and don't have like the chugging down with my fingers. But yeah, I think maybe what I was talking about was when I play, I take my tone back a lot because I play with a pick. And so you
Yeah.
get a lot of like kind of like higher end noises with that and you can actually hear the pick hitting the string if your
Right.
tone is too high, so I kind of try to cheat a little bit to make amends for me not playing with my fingers and I play with like a lower tone. So
Interesting.
like yeah, like the mid and the treble on the amp is like not turned up as loud as maybe it would be if I played with my fingers to just kind of like mask some of those sounds a little bit.
It works.
So
It
maybe
works.
that's fine.
It
Yeah.
definitely works. Because
Thanks.
when I first heard your records, I didn't pick up on that. I feel like my
Mhm.
ears always pick up on that. And then when I
Yeah,
checked
yeah,
out a couple of YouTube videos, I was like, oh, he plays with a pick. He does that in such a
yeah.
unique way. So,
Sweet.
and it
Mhm.
really is full. Like you really do hold down that rhythm section. And did you say you knew Marcus before joining the band?
Yeah, so Marcus Nuccio, who plays drums in Rap Boys, is just like it's like the drummer's curse of like if you know how to play drums and you're involved in the local music scene, like every band wants you to play in their band. So Marcus and I
Right.
had, we met through music at some point. We've kind of like both never been able to track down exactly like the day that we met or anything like that, but definitely met at a show and like through the music community. Probably some point either late in my time in high school or after when I was in college. Just like touring and playing shows in Chicago. And yeah, I recorded records with Marcus for like my other bands, which was called Single Player and is now called Jupiter Styles. So like Marcus plays drums on a lot of that stuff as well. And uh, yeah, I've known him for a very long time, and we've played music together for a long time. So yeah, I like to think that there's a very good like synergy there between us when it
Oh
comes to
yeah.
the rhythm section of the
Oh,
band.
that's a new level,
Yeah.
like friendship slash relationship, right? I mean,
Yeah,
like the
yeah, yeah.
drummer,
It's
like it's you're speaking the same language. You can just look at each other, right? And know,
definitely, yeah. A
yeah.
lot. We practice so much, at least once a week with this band, which might not sound like a lot, but with like real life going on at the same time as adults, like it's pretty good to like practice once a week at least. And we have at this point definitely mastered, like the look, like oh, like I need to do something else right now, or like the song's about to end right now. And we, use that a lot on stage, especially when we're playing these like longer drawn out songs like Black Earth or,
Right.
like whatever,
Like Printer's Devil. That's a long
yeah, yeah,
drawn out, right?
definitely. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
another good example too. There's a lot of like, checking with Marcus or Marcus is checking with me about like where we're at in the song and kind of meeting at the ending point or whatever point we need to switch apart in the song and stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah, a
you've
lot of
been
unspoken stuff.
that's awesome. And you've been a Fender Jazz player for a while. I know I've seen you with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And what's the rest of your rig look like? What kind of sound system do you have?
We're using this like I used to play a Fender Mustang for a very long time
Ah,
just because
cool.
it was like relatively the size, like the neck is relatively like the size of a guitar neck pretty much. It's a short scale bass, so like that was what I learned on.
Cool.
And then eventually graduated to a Fender Jazz when I was like able
Yeah.
to like stretch
Oh,
my
it's the best.
fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I actually learned how to play bass a little bit better, I went up to the Fender Jazz bass. The head is a like it's comparable. It's a Fender. It's comparable to like a Fender Bassman.
Okay.
I don't know the exact model, but it came from a combo amp that Dave ripped. Dave ripped the head out of the combo and like built the housing around it.
Oh, wow.
So that's not like what I have on tour with me is like not the original amp. Like the how like the rectangle that it's sitting in is not the original piece for that. Um, and then so we've always used that just because it sounds awesome. But yeah, like I said, the best thing I can compare it to is like a Fender Bassman. And then the cab I have is just a cab I bought from a friend for $50 back in
Nice.
like
Good
2016. And
deal.
it's no, yeah, traveled with me everywhere. And it's like relatively light for a bass cab, like one person can pick it up, which is key for on being on tour. It's like, you're basically
Right.
moving shit every day. Like
All
Julia always
right.
jokes around like we're basically like a traveling moving company that also travels it.
Right. I'm
But
sure you
yeah,
guys are
so
in good shape, like carrying all
yeah,
that
yeah,
stuff.
I don't know about that. But yeah, so that's like nice. I definitely think I might want to get like a bigger cab in the future just because it is like, it's a 1 by 12, speaker. So it's
Yep.
like the way it is on stage sometimes, depending on like where it's located, the sound like kind of travels and doesn't hit me in the ears exactly if you think about it visually.
Yeah.
And like sound kind of just goes into my hip. So like it would be nice to get like a taller bass cab that way I could like hear those, frequencies and noises a little bit better coming out of my bass cab, but that's for
Yeah.
the future. Yeah.
I feel like for some reason I must have made this up in my head, but I feel like for some reason I saw you had an Ampeg rig, but obviously not.
Oh,
It's more
that might
Fender.
have
So.
been Palehound because we had all our gear up on the stage at
Oh,
the
okay.
yeah.
That might have been it. That might have been
Maybe
it.
I can't remember what Miles was using, but yeah.
Hi, I'm Greg Potters with the albumreview.net podcast. Do you want to amplify your passion? Well, now you can. Introducing createmypodcast.com. Now there is a place you can go to get help building your own podcasts. If you're a business owner or an entrepreneur and you're taking the leap like I did and starting a podcast, I can help. I will walk you through a step-by-step process on how to launch, publish, and grow your podcast. I can also offer quick, easy tips on the best equipment, software, and tips and tricks that are going to be right for you and your budget. To get started, go to createmypodcast.com or message me directly at gpotters@createmypodcast.com. Let's get started. Curious about like your early life, like what music. I mean, for me, I can almost remember, maybe not the day, but it was when I was 12 when music, when I went from like, oh, I kind of like music to, okay, this is what I want to do with the
Yeah,
rest of my
yeah.
life. When did you kind of know that music was a thing for you, or a love?
Um, Damn, yeah, I maybe like the first. I mean, I think maybe I knew, but I didn't fully realize it until like the first time I got in a car and traveled to a show. Like, I don't want to say I was on tour, but like I drove from, where we grew up in the south side of Chicago down to Champaign or Urbana, or no, it was Springfield, Illinois to play a show with our friends band Easter. I was like just
Yeah.
filling in for our friend Kyle who has this band Easter, which is just like an amazing piece of music from that time, like in the early 2010s from Chicago. But it's like this large band kind of situation. And I was like late in high school. Everyone's kind of a few years older than me in this circle, like Dave, Marcus, Julia, and my friend Kyle, who I'm referencing and stuff. So like a lot of the kids in the music scene that I was in were a few years older. So they were playing a show in their area where they lived and they needed help with like an extra guitarist or something. And so Kyle drove me from his parents' house down to Springfield. And I think I just had like so much fun on that little like night trip, going down there, playing a show, staying the night and coming back, or maybe even coming back that night or something. It just like felt so like so much like this big exploration that we were going on and this big journey and stuff like that. And even though it was like 2 hours, it kind of got me maybe addicted to touring when I was young. And now that's like what we love to do. And it's my favorite part about making music is like going out and playing it and stuff. So I think maybe at that point, which I was probably a senior in high school
Wow.
around that time.
So it's kind of
Um,
like the camaraderie of getting
yeah.
together with the people too, because a lot of times you can, I don't know if you've ever been, you don't have to share names, but I don't know if you've ever been in a band where maybe you didn't gel as much with the people, but the music was tight. So in
Mhm.
many cases, you got to kind of, in my opinion, you have to have both, right? Because it is like a family, you
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
have that synergy. So it sounds like it was a lot of the camaraderie.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have like never had that situation
That's
before in my
good.
life.
That's
I've
good.
never, and part of that is because I've like never played music with someone I don't know very well. Like,
Yeah.
like it's always been like Dave and I like know each other like from like when I was like a freshman in high school or maybe even like eighth grade or something, like way back, like when I was
Yeah.
like a literal child.
Right.
And
Right.
just learning how to like play, like I maybe knew how to play three chords or something to this point now where we're like literally touring the world, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always been in a van, like in that situation with people I know very, very well and like consider, deep friends or family or however you want to put it. But yeah, that is like the biggest draw to music for me personally, because I didn't come from a music family or anything like that. I had no
Oh.
music background other than like my friends were kind of starting to get into music and were playing guitar when I was in grade school. And I was like, okay, I'll learn how to play guitar too, because that's what my friends are doing.
Huh.
And so I kind of just like followed along.
So
And
was journalism your first love?
um, I don't know. I don't think so. I think I would like, I definitely remember like writing when I was a kid and stuff, and I like wrote for the local newspaper when I was like a kid, but like I don't think I was like very conscious of like trying to make a career out of it or anything.
Sure, sure.
And like a lot of it was about music or sports, which is still like stuff I'm, obviously very interested in. And for anyone listening, I'm primarily like a sports journalist. So
Right.
it's like I was just interested in that stuff, but I don't think I was making a conscious choice to like make a life out of it. And then when it came to going to college, I kind of was just like, I can't do math, so I guess I will try to write. And like and I went to the University of Illinois because that friend Kyle that I talked about that like brought me down there to in that area to play music was there already going to school there, and I was like, oh well, there's already like a built-in music community that I can like just jump into, and that was like the best decision I ever made. That was like a second place choice in my head when you asked like what was a big moment for me. It was maybe just deciding to go move to Champaign-Urbana and just jumping into that community because that community kind of, yeah, like formed me and like raised me up in the DIY scene. I don't know, to like where I feel like who I am today, I think comes from that time in my life for sure.
Yeah, cool. Do you in terms of like music you listen to in your spare time, like what are some albums or what are some bands that you've been into the last few months or years?
Yeah, I'm definitely like a, like like 2000s indie rock kid. So, I grew up like listening to like
Cool.
Modest Mouse and Interpol and stuff
Nice.
like that. Definitely like, like I am in love with this band, The Beths, who are our friends from
Yeah.
Australia. Like
Yeah,
their
yeah.
Palehound is genuinely one of my favorite bands like ever. So getting to tour with them
That must
and
have been
like getting to
amazing.
call them friends and shit is like so crazy. But yeah,
Yeah.
like every at that whole Boston show, I was just sitting side stage, like, holy shit, like this is the best thing
Right.
ever. Um, but yeah, there's a ton of stuff. I'm really into like Leslie Feist, M. Ward, like that kind of stuff, and still keep up with their careers. Yeah. But I try to spread it around a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Do you remember the first album that kind of blew your mind?
Um, other than like Avril Lavigne as a kid, I would say like I definitely Antics by Interpol was really like the first thing where I was like, oh, I
Cool. I
don't
haven't heard that one.
understand this because it's not like just straightforward pop music, it's not like pop rock or radio country or whatever I heard growing up when I was a kid because like I said, like I didn't like come from anyone in my family that was like particularly interested in music. So
Right.
I don't have the story of like sitting around as a kid while like my parents played me the Beatles or something. Like I never had that. So like my
Wild.
friend introduced me to um yeah, like my friends started introducing me to bands when I was in grade school and I remember that one I would like take the CD in my like Walkman CD player
The Discman, right?
over and over and over again because it's when you listen to it, like you said you haven't really checked it out before. It doesn't sound like as complicated as it did to me when I was a kid or anything, but there's like
Right.
this mysterious nature to the whole record. And like the lyrics generally don't make any sense and stuff. So it was just like all these questions I had where I was like, oh shit, like everything's kind of been spoon fed to me up to this point with like pop country music or like Sugar Ray or whatever the fuck was on the
Right.
radio. So
Right.
it's like,
Right.
which I love all that stuff, but like it didn't challenge you at all, like not in a very complicated way. So I definitely think like that Interpol record was like a huge eye opener for me at that time, or like Wilco's Yankee Hotel Foxtrot and stuff like
Oh
that.
man. Oh, another
Things
great
with like a
Chicago
lot of
band.
just weird shit going on, like
Yeah.
yeah, just introduced me to like the creativity that could be explored in music, which I really love.
Yeah, it's not the same formula that you heard growing up. I mean, I grew up in the
Yeah.
70s and 80s and it was like Michael Jackson,
Hmm.
that he was gigantic. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He was the Taylor Swift of my
For
child.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
And he was bigger than anything. But then
Yeah.
when I got to my teens and I heard Pink Floyd, and I was like,
Dude, yeah, yeah,
what
absolutely.
is this? So
Mhm.
similar to your experience with Interpol, it was like, hold on a second, this is different, like way,
Yeah.
way different, right? So very cool story. Like a lot of people that I talk to, Sean, they have like older brothers and sisters that kind of turn them on
Mhm.
to music. Did you have any older siblings
Um,
that got you
I do
into
have an
music?
older brother, but he wasn't really into music. So
Oh,
I think it kind of came from this group of friends that I'm still like, they're my best friends now.
awesome.
They all kind of got into music and were involved with like the music community at some point, but a lot of them kind of, most musicians don't pretty much like make it past playing in a band in college or something. So
Right.
like everyone's kind of out of it now, but they still like, text each other albums and stuff like that all the time.
Sure.
But so my one friend Josh Carlson was really into music, and then his older brother Jake Carlson was like his community of friends, which I would like kind of loosely count Dave in and stuff. Were like all these kids I looked up to because they were like the older kids that played music in the local community that I was in growing up. And so I would say like that this group of kids that were a few years older than me kind of just like I was always like, oh, what are they listening to? Or
Yeah.
like, like if we'd be hanging out at like their house, we'd kind of be like in one side of the room and like his older brother and their friends would be in the other side of the room, kind of like listening to their music and we'd like just be like over,
What are they?
very
Yeah.
like
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we're little followers. So So yeah, just absorbing what was around me definitely is what got me into all that and influenced me.
I think the older sibling thing is huge. I didn't have an
Yeah, yeah,
older sibling, but each time I would go over to a friend's house, we'd be listening what the older brother was
for
playing,
sure.
or of
Yeah.
course, most of the older sisters, it was like Duran Duran or something like
Uh-huh.
that. But we'd be listening and be like, what is that? King Crimson? Like what is all that stuff? That
Yeah,
was
like that's
quite
weird.
different. Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. Quite different from, Guns N' Roses or
Sure,
Poison
sure.
or that 80s hair metal scene that we were into
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit there too. So, well, I was going to ask you, but I think you've already answered this. Like, I know for a lot of people, me as well, I kind of used music as an escape when I was a little kid. If I was ever
Yeah.
stressed or whatever, I had an anxiety as a teenager. I would always just like escape into my room and throw on my headphones and listen to music. But it
Yeah.
sounds like like you sort of maybe got into it a little bit later, but then you just really jumped in with both feet, and
Yeah.
now here you are.
Yeah, it's crazy. I definitely have those like memories of like having like intimate moments with music growing up, like different types of music and stuff. But yeah, like nothing. I do like appreciate that like solitude that comes with like putting headphones on and like turning the lights off or going to sleep listening to music or something or yeah, I don't know, or finding a space in the house that's like reserved for this is where I sit and listen to music. As
Right.
goofy as that sounds, it's just like nice to have. It's like a library, or something.
Yeah.
It's like nice to have those spaces reserved. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely had that stuff. But yeah, definitely like also just like found community in it and kept
That's the
trying
key.
to stay involved with that community. So I think that was the key for me was the community aspect of everything.
Yeah, awesome. I peeked at the band's website and I see that you guys have a gig planned for Fort Wayne, Indiana,
Yeah,
in a couple
all
weeks, or maybe a
places.
little more than a couple weeks. So January 25th. Is that sort of like a warm-up gig before you guys go into the studio?
Yeah, it's just there's a festival in Fort Wayne or the Fort Wayne area that kind of they do like a
Nice.
winter show to kind of raise awareness for like their, tickets going on sale or something. I think like Pitchfork used to do a similar thing like over in Chicago when that was going on, when they would like do a winter show to be like, hey, we're announcing the lineup soon
Yeah.
for this bigger festival in the summer and stuff. So yeah, they just asked us, Fort Wayne's like not too far from Chicago, so I think it just kind of made sense. But yeah, it's just like kind of a one-off show. Not like for any particular reason of, warming up or anything, but it does coincide with that. So it is nice to we'll probably play a lot of new shit at that show and
Yeah. That'll
yeah,
be
so
awesome.
experimenting a little bit, but in a fun way. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, Sean, I know that you have a hard stop at 6, so I really just wanted to thank you again for joining me. I
Yeah,
truly
thank you.
admire. You're very welcome, man. I enjoyed meeting with you, and I truly admire your bass playing as a fellow bass player myself. I got my jersey on here.
Hell yeah.
And just the fact when I saw it, I was like, I dig this dude's playing. And then when I actually saw a video and I saw that you were playing pretty much the same bass as me,
Yeah, crazy. Yeah.
I had to reach out. So
Oh yeah.
I'm going to be following you guys through the next album and
Oh yeah, yeah.
would love it if we could do this again down the road in the future when the album comes out. And
Absolutely, yeah.
just wanted to thank you again for taking the time out of your busy day. Not only are you a touring musician, but you also work what sounds like pretty much a full-time job. So
Yeah.
I have
Yeah, I have
a
a
lot of
work
respect
call.
for
That's
that.
why I had to jump off.
Yeah, no worries. I don't know if you're
It's
anything
like
like
the
me.
coolest musician thing to say.
No, no. Hey, it's a little bit of a splice of reality, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
so.
It's true, yeah.
So if you're anything like me, I know sometimes before work calls, I have to prep for them. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that.
Well,
But
thank you
hey,
so much. Yeah, yeah.
pleasure's all mine. Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate it. I'd love to keep in touch and good luck next month at the gig.
Oh
Have a
yeah.
good holiday season
Yeah, you too.
and I'll talk to you again soon.
So yeah, we'll stay in touch and we'll see you at the next Boston show that we play, I
Hell
hope.
yeah. Hell
Yeah.
yeah, without a doubt. Any New England show,
So sick.
I'll
All right.
certainly do my best to be there. So
Oh
awesome.
yeah.
Well, thanks again. Happy New Year.
Cool.
Have a good rest of your night.
You too. Thanks, Greg.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Bye-bye.
See you.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and my conversation with Sean Neumann from Ratboys. What a life Sean is having. So I met Sean at their Cambridge, Massachusetts show back in November and asked him to be on the podcast. And he's so gracious and easy to talk to. And I'm just really grateful for his time. So a bit of business now. If you're interested in any of the books or albums that I've discussed in this episode or previous episodes, go to albumreview.net and pick up a copy of your own. Listen to all my podcast album reviews at albumreview.net by clicking on the podcast tab. They can also be heard wherever podcasts are available. Please follow the show on your preferred platform so you can get regular updates on new episodes. And also, if you guys would be so kind as to pop a quick review or rate the podcast, that helps move the needle and get the word out there. Remember, I do want to hear from you, so please email me any and all feedback, album review requests, and any questions you might have to gpotters@albumreview.net. That's GPOTTERS at albumreview.net. If you'd like to get regular updates on reviews, interviews, product and music news, go to the homepage and join the mailing list. Visit our LinkedIn and YouTube page and stay tuned for updates on Instagram, Facebook, and that thing they call TikTok. You can find me at albumreviewnet. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to check out Ratboys in 2025 as they will release their next soon-to-be recorded album with a subsequent tour. So drop the needle and keep listening. Bye.
Take a trip down by the highway. 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 Take a trip down